Welcome to Varsity Maine Live for the Portland Press Herald. I am Travis Lazarzik. We are sponsored by Central Maine Power. Tonight, I am joined by a gaggle of mics. We have from the forecaster, Michael Hoffer, from the Kennebec Journal and Morning Sentinel, Mike Mandel, and from Levitt High School, our guest, Mike Hathaway, who's the longtime coach of the Levitt High School football team. He's about to take his Hornets to their seventh state championship game under him and going for their fourth gold ball on Saturday when they play Madomic Valley in the Class C championship game up at Cameron Stadium in Bangor. Coach, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
You're an old hat at these state weeks now, and the more you do it, the more you find yourself with any habits or traditions that you feel like you have to keep up?
No, not really. I think every time you play in one, you try to do less. I think the first time you do it, you want to put a lot in, and have a lot of wrinkles and things like that. And then each year you do it, it's more, you're playing somebody you don't really know more than likely. So it's getting back to basics and doing some things you're really good at. So, we've tried to handle it that way. But other than that, we try to keep it relatively normal. It seems like we're always at Lewiston this time of year practicing. So that's a good sign.
Yeah, Lewiston's been good to you here in recent weeks. And I know you never take these things for granted, but when you have a season like last year where you suffered such an agonizing loss, is it a little sweeter to get back in a season like this? Because you never know when the next time is going to come, right? I mean, isn't this a little bit sweeter getting back this year after such a painful loss in 2021?
Yeah, I think so. And you put that up against the year before, losing the entire year, and we had a really good team coming back with my son and Tommy Casey. We're going to kind of lead that team, and we had some really good players around them. And some of these guys who are playing now would have been sophomores on that team and would have played a lot. So it is sweet. These guys have put in a lot of work. There was a lot of disappointment that went with those two seasons, but these guys never gave up. That's what I told them the other day, is that they're a prime example of if you just keep working hard and keep your head down, then good things will happen. So I'm proud of them.
Mike, let's switch gears for a second. We've got feels like a lot of good quarterbacks in the state over the last few years. You've had a few of them going all the way back to like Jordan Hersom, who won a Fitzpatrick Trophy under you. You mentioned your son Wyatt, who was an excellent quarterback on your state championship team in 2019. Now you have Noah Carpenter, who can do just a little bit of everything, coming off a game where he had 420 yards of offense. What are you seeing out of quarterbacks in Maine now that's just helping them all kind of up their games?
Well, I think the offenses in Maine have changed a lot over the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years. There's certainly a lot more teams that are in the shotgun than there used to be. So I think that helps feature that position a little bit more. And then I think you see guys that they're working on their craft more in the offseason. Some of these guys in Portland are getting down to red zone. The guys up north are working out with some guys up there. There's kind of some things all over. We've got the Maine Elite Camp in the summer. So BL and Coop and I are working with a bunch of those guys, and you see a lot of guys going to prospect days and things like that and these different college showcases. So they're getting around and getting a lot more instruction than they used to and working at their craft more. So they're getting better, and the offenses are featuring them more. And, I think it's pretty cool when you can give a quarterback a lot of responsibility and watch him go out there and do it. So, we've been lucky to have some talented guys, but they're also guys who have worked real hard to know what they're doing. So they've had that freedom and they've done well with it. So.
Mike Mandel, you have anything for Coach?
Yeah. We talk about, some of the things you guys have dealt with over the past few years. Obviously, last year, the heartbreaking loss to Cape. But then 2020, you had a great team too, a team that would very well could have won another gold ball after your great year in 2019. How difficult was that to come back and move forward from as football's kind of returned over the past 2 years? Because those were some really tough breaks you've caught.
Yeah, I mean, people go through worse things than losing football games all the time. So, you got to keep it in perspective to some degree. But just in terms of, in a football sense and in a coaching sense and just kind of in a leader of young men sense, it was a really hard time for a lot of people. Coach Bonavie, Mark and Chris Gray and Dave Bach and I, we talk about it quite a bit. Like this past season, like, we worked as hard as the kids did, probably, to be quite honest, to, correct some things that we felt that we needed to improve at. And, I think the combination of, the kids and the coaches being real motivated by that kind of disappointment, it just kind of led us to some good things. So, again, I just think there's a great lesson for kids and adults when you face adversity like that. You've got to keep your head down and keep working. And we were all real disappointed, but we tried not to take a lot of pity on ourselves. We tried to just get right back and start working at it. And the kids really set the tone this year. Those guys who, are coming back that were on that field last year for that Cape game, those guys have really, they've been 6 or 7 of the top 8 or 9 players in our league all year. And they've come out every week and shown up in practice, in games. Like our stars have played like stars, and our role guys have starred in their roles. Like they've been so good. Some of those guys that, guys that hang around your program for 3 or 4 years. And, all of a sudden they're starters and nobody really would have counted on them for much of anything. They're out there making plays and doing their thing. So I love seeing it, but it's a really resilient group, and it was really tough on us. Really tough. It was, really disappointing to lose that way. We had kind of gone through some disappointment, way back. If you go a few years to Freiburg, we had a coach pass away the day before the game. So we've kind of gone through this before. A lot of these guys have been around the program. We got a lot of kids whose dads have coached in the program. And they really took it to heart. So I think when you see our team, it really is a team that's on a mission and really is a team that has a big chip on their shoulder.
You had I remember you posting on Twitter after the Cape regular season game this year that you won in a close game. Just how how great the atmosphere was. I know obviously last year both of your games were considered games of the year as well. How cool has it been to see that rivalry, that kind of showdown between you and Cape in big games over the past year or two?
Yeah, it's great. And it even goes back a little further than that. I mean, when Aaron was there, we had some great back and forth games. You go all the way back to 2009 with our state game. Those were 2 really, really good football teams that played each other. And there's been some great games over the years. So, both Aaron and Sean have done a great job coaching those guys. They're always one of the most well-schemed teams we play. Their techniques that their guys use up front are always really, really sound. And they always seem to have an explosive player back there in the backfield. So it's really been a great back and forth. And, you don't like to lose to anybody, but that probably sweetened the rivalry a little bit. And, it really has been a nice back and forth, and it's been a nice league. It's been nice to play Wells again. That's a team. You go back to when I played at Levitt, we used to play them all the time, and we've had some good games with them. And York was the same way. That's a team we played a lot in our history. So it really was a nice schedule this year overall, for sure.
Coach, let's cut to the chase and talk about what's coming up Saturday, because I know that's the biggest thing on your mind right now. Before the show started, we talked for a moment about, obviously you know Cape as well as any. You probably know Cape about as well as you know your own team, but the team you're going to be squaring off with on Saturday is a very different story. How do you prepare when you don't really know anything about your opponent?
Well, you start by watching a lot of film. So, you gather up as much as you can and you really start going through it and trying to look at their personnel and look at their schemes and, try to dissect them, really. So, our coaches kind of divvy that work up, and, we spend a good part of Sunday and Monday getting that done. And then, you try to install some things. And I think we were talking before, we've really tried to, each time we do this, I think we try to keep it a little bit simpler than the last time. So, you try to find a few things that they like to do and probably will attack you with and have some counters for those. And then obviously some things that you like offensively that are going to match up well with what they do. But it's tough when you don't play a team and you're not kind of sure how they're going to play against you. And we really haven't played against their coaches either. So there will be definitely a feeling out process, kind of like an old school boxing match at the beginning of the game. I'm sure both teams will be, ready to go and they'll show something maybe they haven't shown, but I'm sure both teams will rely on a lot of what they've done successfully because we've done it well.
Okay. Coach Mike Hathaway, we know it's a busy week. We thank you for taking a few minutes to talk to us about the game. Good luck on Saturday when you take on Madomic Valley.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Good luck, Coach. Have fun.
All right. Thank
Mike Hathaway from Levitt High School. Before we move on to the poll and look at the 4 state championship games this week, let's look back to the 8-man championships we just had this past Saturday in Augusta. Michael Hoffer, you and I saw one of the better games of the season, I think, when Yarmouth beat Waterville in the large school game 30-26. Kind of tell us about that one a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great back and forth game. And, I think coming in, we didn't know if it would be that competitive. I mean, you just look back at the last year, the state game was 56-0. So it was actually really a treat. Waterville played very well. It was clear it was going to be a game, certainly at halftime, they were right there. And it looked like Yarmouth was on the brink of breaking it open in the third quarter. But, Waterville with a nice drive, a nice fourth down conversion for a touchdown. And then they get the interception return for a touchdown. The next thing you know, Yarmouth's down by 2, and it looked like they had the game in control. But, it came down to a drive. Waterville had a chance to put the game away. They had a bad snap. Fourth and 1 from the 2-yard line. If they had scored there, there's a very good chance they would have won the game. But Yarmouth got a chance to take over at its 14 with about 7 minutes left. And, like I commented, it was a drive right out of Coach Jim Hartman's wildest dreams. 16 runs, no passes. They ran out almost the entire clock. And, the gold ball was waiting there at the end of the rainbow. But just terrific. Michael McGonigal, Spencer Lebrecq, they got the job done. They had to convert a fourth down twice, and they did it. And then Yarmouth was able to punch in the touchdown with about 30 seconds left. And, I thought Waterville maybe still had a chance for a miracle comeback, but kind of a crazy play on the ensuing kickoff where supposedly Yarmouth was supposed to kick deep, but the ball came off the kicker's foot wrong. It looked like it was an onside kick, and it was actually recovered by the Clippers, and that clinched it. But it's everything you want from a championship game, right? I mean, high drama, late touchdown. Both teams played like champions, and, unfortunately only one could win, but it's been a long 11 years since Yarmouth last gold ball, and they really earned it the other day.
Mike Mandel, you covered this Waterville team throughout the year. I know they're disappointed losing a second straight state championship game, but it really looks like Coach Isaac LeBanc is building something there.
Yeah, and they did it with a lot of young players. You look at their guys like Dustin Hunter, Dawson Harrison, and a lot of Wyatt Grady. A lot of their skill players are going to be back next year. They're losing a group of 6 or 7 kids, but sounds like they're going to replace that with the same number at the youth level. They in talking with Isaac in the building up at the game, in the build up to the game, they knew it was going to take a Herculean effort to compete with Yarmouth, because Yarmouth was Yarmouth having beaten an MTA team that kind of handed it to Waterville in the regular season. But yeah, it looks like they are, and it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see numbers wise with some of these teams too. Whether certain teams stay 8-man, whether they go back to 11-man. I know there are some teams in 8-man ranks that are starting to build those numbers back up after some struggles, and I'm sure you'll see teams come and go like that. But yeah, I'd say as long as they're in the 8-man ranks, they're going to be competitive, and their skill players are going to be back next year, and you have to figure that they're going to be at the top of the large school class again.
Okay, thank you, Mike. In the small school game, we had Old Orchard Beach winning over Orono 46-22. You got a feel for a team like Old Orchard Beach that was really, one of the schools at the forefront of getting 8-man football to come to Maine. And Coach Dean Plant was really an early advocate for the sport to come to Maine. It saved his program. It saved a bunch of programs in the state. And so now for them to get their first state title since 1993 is probably special for the Seagulls. And congratulations to Orono, who really showed a great turnaround. This was a team that hadn't won a game entering the season since 2016, about 25-game losing streak. For them to go from 0 years to being on the cusp of a state championship shows that 8-man football has really helped rebuild their program too. And for a lot of schools, it's given them a second chance at football. So I think it's doing exactly what the MPA wanted it to do when they brought it in 2019.
It's a fun product too, I would say. Sorry, Mike. But I mean, it's fun to watch. It's very wide open. And yeah, you're right. I mean, ultimately, you want as many teams to play as much as they can and to be as competitive as they can. And, you look at the small school division, you had a 4 seed versus a 5 seed in the state game. I think it blew up everyone's bracket, but just it made for great drama. And, congratulations, Old Orchard. They did not win it easily. They had to go to Rumford. They had to go to Dirigo, and then they had to go up to Augusta to win the state game. So they got their frequent travel miles and came home with a gold ball.
Well, I was just going to say, I remember 2019. Orono had to forfeit their regular season because they did not opt for 8-man. They tried to play an 11-man schedule, and they just didn't have enough kids to go around. And now here they are looking to push the 40s in numbers over the next few years. They very good chance they're back playing 11-man football now that they have that youth programs numbers, and numbers like that are going to come and go for some of these programs. So and it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that in the years to come.
Absolutely.
Very good point, Mike. Thank you. With our poll this week, let's just go down through the top 5 real quick. Oxford Hill still number 1 at all 8 first place votes. Number 2, Thornton Academy. That game will be decided. That top spot will be decided, I should say, in the state Class A championship game on Saturday at Fitzpatrick Stadium. Number 3, Levitt. And then we have a tie at 4th with Portland and Skowhegan, who are going to be playing each other in the Class B state championship game. So depending on what happens Saturday, we could see some shifting there. All right, let's start with Class D, guys, and go down through these games. Class D state championship game, we have Lisbon St. Dominic's. They're 7-3, taking on defending state champion Foxcroft Academy. They're 9-1. This game is going to be at Cameron Stadium in Bangor on Saturday. Two contrasting styles. Lisbon is a team that I saw last week in their 28-21 semifinal win at Freeport. Didn't throw the ball once. Now, the weather was just a monsoon, and it wasn't really conducive to a passing game anyway. But still, Lisbon doesn't need to play that way. They have Colby Lavasser, a 1,000-yard rusher. Josh Carter's a 1,000-yard rusher. Jack Ramich and Jimmy Fitzsimmons can run the ball. A lot of offensive weapons there. Foxcroft, on the other hand, will throw pretty much as they want with quarterback Wyatt Rayfield. He's thrown for about 1,400 yards, 26 touchdowns, and just 5 interceptions. Wide receiver Caden Crocker is one of the best receivers in the state regardless of class. He's got 45 catches for 646 yards and 14 touchdowns. Lisbon gave Foxcroft their only loss of the regular season, 14-13 around mid-season. Mike Mandel, in your past life, you covered a lot of the Little 10 conference and saw some Foxcroft games. What can you tell us about these ponies?
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting you bring that up because right before Foxcroft, after the 2016 season, dropped from C to D, and they immediately won. They immediately won 2 Class D North titles. Both times, unfortunately, ran into a beastly Wells team led by Tyler Bridge that kind of just housed all of Class D for those 2 years. And then they kind of fell off a little bit. I think they were 5-5 or 4-6 in 2019. Then the COVID year, and then ever since then, not only is that a Foxcroft that 14-13 loss back in week 3 or 4, whatever it was, their only loss of the season. It's their only loss since the statewide Class D emerged in 2021. They're 20-1. Aside from that, you got to think there's going to be a lot of revenge factor there. Foxcroft has been here before. They've been able to win tight games like this. I mean, you go back to that great state championship last year. You go back to their great rematch with Winthrop in week 1 this year, and then they're coming off a 32-0 walloping of a talented Winthrop team that might be one of the more impressive results you'll see anywhere this year. And you've got to think the fact that that's the only loss these kids have had the past 2 years, past 3, considering football wasn't played in 2020, that there's going to be a real revenge factor. They're going to a big revenge factor for Foxcroft this Saturday against a Lisbon team that likes to run the ball, and Chris Cates is going to have his boys prepared as well.
Definitely. All right, the other game up in Bangor is going to be at 2:30 in the afternoon, and that's Class C game. We talked about a little with Coach Hathaway. That's Madomic Valley. They're 9-2 versus those unbeaten Levitt Hornets, who are 10-0. Madomic is really an unknown just because of where they are in the state on the mid-coast. They don't get a lot of coverage. They're kind of tucked away down there. But they've really built a great program. They're only in their 7th season of varsity football, and they've just kind of been building to this. Mike Mandel, I'll go back to you because you cover a lot of those Class C North teams. What can you tell us about this Madomic team? I know they rolled a traditional powerhouse in Winslow earlier in the year.
So I was at that game in Waldoboro on that hot Saturday afternoon in week 2, and I remember talking to Coach Ryan Snell for our preview story midweek, and we were kind of joking about how you have one powerhouse program in Winslow and one of the newest programs in the state in Madomic, and he pointed out to me that Winslow has more state championships than they had seasons of varsity football.
Right.
So it was quite the contrast in that game. Madomic Valley, along with Herman and Winslow, was considered the favorite, one of the two favorites in this class. They really proved themselves. It took of course, that 40-0 game was without Matt Quirion in the lineup for Winslow, which he makes them a much different team. And you saw that in the semifinals when they pulled out a 21-13 win over Winslow in a much tighter game, and then had a very impressive win. Impressive win over Herman. Now, this Levitt team they're about to face is a powerhouse. I mean, they're you talk about a team where they've. Another team we're going to preview in a few minutes, Portland. They just thrashed them 42-8 back early in the season. So this is a team that can play Class B, possibly even win Class B. And kind of like we talked about with Mike Hathaway a few minutes ago, it'll be interesting to see how two teams that really have never seen each other have a feel for this thing on Saturday up in Bangor.
Okay, thank you, Mike. The Class B state championship game, we have Skowhegan. They're 9-2. They're playing on Portland, who's 8-3. Portland winning 7 games in a row after a 1-3 starting. It's a really, really tough schedule. They might have played the toughest schedule in the state in Class B. Haven't lost to a Class B opponent all year, actually. Michael Hoffer, what can you tell us about these Bulldogs?
Well, everything changed for Portland midseason when they inserted Kennedy Charles at quarterback, and he has done literally everything for this team, and they're peaking at the right time. Portland, there were a couple of occasions against South Portland the other day in the regional final where, Portland had to have a big play, and Kennedy Charles makes that big play. And, not only are they playing well on all facets, really, offense, defense, special teams, but to win a championship, sometimes you need a little luck too. And in the regional final against South Portland last weekend, they're actually down 14-6 late in the first half. Nothing's going their way. Kennedy Charles actually gets stripped of the ball, and miraculously it bounces right into the hands of Andrew Brewer, who takes it in for a touchdown, and that turned the tide completely in that game. Portland actually scored early in the third quarter to go ahead, and then they never looked back. But the Bulldogs, they were in the state game 3 times in 4 years, 2015, 2016, 2018 in Class A, and they had the misfortune of going up against either a powerhouse Thornton Academy team or a powerhouse Bonnie Eagle team, and really they were decided underdogs going into those games. I think this time around it's a very different story with their win streak, with their confidence, playing at Fitzy. Let's face it, I know they're the visiting team, but they're going to be very confident playing at home. And if Kennedy Charles keeps doing what he does, good luck stopping these Bulldogs. They haven't won one in 20 years. The gold ball is close enough to taste. And I think if they come in and they play disciplined and they don't make mistakes, I think they're going to take home that big prize.
Yeah. And they've also forced 21 turnovers on defense. I think 12 interceptions, 9 fumble recoveries.
Yeah. Opportunistic.
They've seen an offense like the Skowhegan one. I know South Portland has an offense similar to Skowhegan's in that they have a big quarterback who can do a little everything. But Mike Mandel, tell us about how Skowhegan's offense and everything seems to run through their 6'6", 6'7" quarterback, Adam Savage.
Well, there's a lot of similarities in both these teams. Immediately, just like when you watch film, Kennedy Charles jumps out for Portland. Adam Savage jumps out in a similar way for Skowhegan. They both these quarterbacks have speed. They can both make tackles. They're kind of emotional leaders for their teams. They're kind of the hype men, even when they're not when they're not on the football field. Outside of that, they've both got athletes at the skill positions. They both got size. They're both quarterback run heavy, something that Ryan Libby noted to me when I spoke to him Tuesday night up there at practice. They both got size up front, so it's a very matchup between two kind of similar styles. And yeah, Skowhegan, they had those speed bumps offensively in those losses against TA and Wyndham where they only scored 7 points. But you really could sense it clicking. They got a backtrack against Brewer, and that game against Lawrence where They possess the ball 9 times and score 9 touchdowns in a 66-48 win over Lawrence. That was just one of the more wild games you'll ever see. Now, the caveat to that game was they did give up a lot of rushing yards, and that's certainly something that could happen again if they're not careful. But you look back to what they did against Falmouth in the Class B North championship game. They were able to get back on track. They held Finn Caxton Smith, who was another great running threat at quarterback, who kind of slotted over from running back and replaced Peyton Mitchell early in the season. And Indy Backman, they held them to 71 yards on 19 carries in that win. And one of the early touchdowns Falmouth scored was a defensive touchdown. So if they can kind of get the offense playing, if they can kind of make a few adjustments offensively, I don't think they were obviously not quite as crisp offensively against Falmouth as they were against Lawrence, and play defensively like they did against the Navigators. I think they have a good chance for a gold ball. But Portland is going to be probably the toughest team they faced outside of TA. So it's going to be a tough task. I've gone back and forth on this one, and I can see every time I do it, I can see myself going a different way as to who wins.
Yeah, I think it has a chance to be the best state game of the 4 on Saturday. Finally, we have a rematch in Class A of last year's championship. It's Thornton Academy. They're 8-2 versus Oxford Hills 10-0. Thornton Academy has won 7 games in a row after a couple of close losses early in the season to Oxford Hills and Bedford, New Hampshire. Oxford Hills seems to be clicking now with quarterback Eli Soren, who might be the player of the year in the state. Last week in their win over Bonnie Eagle, he threw for 176 yards and 3 touchdowns, ran for 2 more. But really what was impressive about Oxford Hills last week was a defense that held Bonnie Eagle to, I think, 18 yards in the first half. Michael Hoffer, you cover Class A South. What can you tell us about both of these teams?
Well, I think of the 4 state games, this is the one that we probably are the least surprised at the matchup. I mean, it really, since both teams walked off the field last November, we kind of expected we were going to see a rematch. And even with TA's early struggles this year, I mean, it was clear that there really wasn't a third team in Class A that was going to step up and challenge these two. I thought for a while maybe Scarborough had the athletes to do it. You never want to write off Bonnie Eagle, but clearly these are the 2 best teams. And Oxford Hills, both in football and basketball last year, got really close. I know this group wants to get over the hump and finish it off, but it's really hard to bet against a Thornton Academy team that's peaking. They're in the state game almost every year, so they're going to be up for the challenge. I think this has the potential to be a really exciting, possibly high-scoring, down-to-the-wire game too. And I think it's going to come down to, as these games often do, who controls the ball best, who avoids the big turnover, the big penalty. Oxford Hills maybe on balance is a little bit stronger, but I wouldn't say they're guaranteed for anything, unless they come out and play really a flawless game.
Okay.
Real quickly, Michael. I was a little skeptical of TA earlier in the year, but that loss to Oxford was close, and then that loss to that New Hampshire team that's turned out to be one of the best teams of all in New Hampshire. So I mean, They were right there in both these losses, and So we talk about early season struggles, but they played well against very good teams. They just happened to be on the losing side of them.
Right. Yeah, confidence builders.
Yeah, and you talk about TA being hot at the right time. 10-0 is 10-0, right? And Oxford Hills doesn't get any hotter than that. So I think it'll be another really good game down at Fitzpatrick Stadium. That game's at 11 a.m., the first game of the day down in Portland.
Right.
All right. Be sure to check out varsitymaine.com for all the coverage of all these games. We have features and previews of all these games coming up. We're going to take a break after this and be back for the winter season. So for Michael, for Mike, and Coach Hathaway, I'm Travis. Thanks for joining us.